Welcome to the Root Cause Business of Medicine podcast, where we explore what's broken in healthcare and what we can do about it. I'm Dr. Erik Lundquist, and I've been practicing functional medicine for the past 15 to 20 years. I'm excited to co-host this podcast with my brother, Dr. Davin Lundquist,
who's just beginning his journey into functional medicine. We come from different points on the path, but we do share a common goal. We want to rethink how medicine is practiced and help others do the same.
The U.S. healthcare system is in crisis, rising costs, declining outcomes, and physician burnout at an all-time high. But we found a different way, another way, a better way.
On this podcast, we dive into real stories from medical professionals who've stepped away from the traditional model, kind of like me, and have found a new purpose in integrative, functional, and alternative approaches to care.
These are authentic conversations with practitioners and friends who redefine success, not just for themselves, but for their patients and communities.
Whether you're a clinician feeling stuck, a student seeking direction, or just curious about what is possible,
you're in the right place. This is the Root Cause Business of Medicine podcast. We're here for another episode of the Root Cause of Business of Medicine podcast. It's a mouthful, but we're super excited to have our guest here today, Chris Magryta. Chris and I met doing functional medicine back, I think, like 2014 or something like that. We were at a conference. And we totally hit it off. And Chris is a pediatrician, which varies from Davin and I, who are both family physicians. And we've gotten our fair share of pediatrics over the years, but we're super excited to have Chris on the podcast today. And one of the things that's really interesting about Chris's situation is that he, and we'll let him talk a little bit more about this, but Chris still works in a general pediatric office and actually works with a lot of Medicaid or underserved individuals. So they don't have a lot of finances, and yet he's still able to wiggle in some functional medicine and integrative medicine and help make some pretty significant changes with his patients who are willing to really get down to those 5 pillars of health of lifestyle changes. So it's been really fun to have conversations with you over the years, Chris, and see how successful you've been in your practice despite the limitations and challenges. So we're looking forward to hearing more about that journey today. This is the first time Davin's meeting him, and so we're happy to have you here. The purpose of this podcast is really to help open up this world of the business of medicine, particularly in the functional and integrative world. We have, those of us who have gone through training, we get super excited about what we're learning, but then we don't know exactly how to make money doing it. Therein lies the big challenge a lot of times. So today we're going to be hearing about Chris's story and kind of here. Davin, what questions do you have for Chris to get us started?
Well, I'm just really fascinated to hear kind of how your journey evolved. I'm guessing that as a, pediatrician, they didn't have a functional medicine, fellowship when you were going through training. So, I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of your why and what it is that sort of drives you to want to practice that way, in a pediatric population.
Well, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for letting me be a part of this. I think this is super fun, and my world is a bit different than the average person in functional medicine, so I think this would be sort of a fun conversation because of the disparity compared to a lot of other folks that are doing this, especially in pediatrics. So my journey sort of began, I guess the simple answer is I went into medicine because my grandmother passed away from rheumatic heart disease, and she was one of the very early recipients of a heart valve transplant, and was able to live a very good life until she unfortunately passed away at a relatively young age when I was around 8 years old. And so that was sort of eye-opening to me that, somebody could lose their life to an infection. And so for the better part of the next bunch of years, went to college, in the north. And then I ended up going down south to Emory for med school and fell in love with medicine there. But it was the allopathic version. It was the treatment version. It was the pharmacological version. And at that time, I drank all the Kool-Aid. It made sense to me, and it was good, and it was wonderful. And I remember taking the nutrition training that we had. It was 16 hours, and we had access to the knowledge beforehand, so nobody really studied. And it was sort of a glossed over, while thousands of hours of pharmacology was the baseline. And so, at that time, I was still naive to the fact that that was wrong. I was just like, hey, this is great. Went to UVA, practiced medicine in pediatrics, and loved that too. Thought, wait, this is great. We're treating kids. We're doing great things. We're treating leukemia. We're dealing with these really intense diseases, and we're seeing a lot of amazing outcomes. And somewhere between 1992 when I entered med school 92 when I entered med school and around 2000, everything started to change in the sense of the diseases we're seeing in kids. And so I'm sort of sitting there watching this continuum of what pediatrics used to be, which is primarily an infectious disease field, which was the most of the issues that we dealt with were primary infectious disease related, and some cancer here and there. And it wasn't huge volumes, but still cancer was there, and some behavioral disease, but not much. And then, life starts changing. I'm at UVA. I'm leaving. I think I understand all this stuff. I come to Salisbury Pediatrics, where I'm at now in Salisbury, North Carolina. And it's a large, old school, private pediatric practice. We've been in existence, I think, 67 years this year. And when I came in 99, I was one of the younger junior partners. And so I came in again, eyes wide open to this is beautiful, this is perfect. But then over the next 7 years until about 2006, I started to notice something didn't make sense. Kids were sicker. We're seeing more things in kids that I didn't understand, more ADHD, more autism, more just general behavioral problems. Oh, by the way, kids are getting heavier. And does that matter? Well, probably we didn't understand at the time that was actually the front end of the sword of metabolic syndrome that was coming. But at first we just thought, okay, kids are getting bigger. It's not the best thing in the world, but maybe not the worst thing in the world. And all of a sudden we start seeing type 2 diabetes. And this was around the time we started seeing the high ALTs. And all of a sudden, okay, wow, we got a lot of problems here, folks. And I didn't understand it. We weren't trained to understand what was happening. We were trained to throw drugs at this. Well, what kind of drugs do you have to throw at these kids? Nothing. Right? They're sitting there with early signs of diabetes, but if they're not diabetic, nobody does anything. You send them to a nutritionist and nothing changed. And so around this time, one of my partners, Kathy Russo, was like, hey, you ever heard of Dr. Weil? And I'm like, yeah, I know Dr. Weil. My wife loves him. I don't follow him at all. My wife gets his newsletter every week. She reads us. So for full disclosure, my wife's the smarter one of the pair, and she's the registered dietitian, and we met at UVA. And so she would take care of my kids when I was an intern. I would consult her, and that's how we met. And lo and behold, she's asking me questions about nutrition, and I know absolutely nothing. I think I have the answer because I'm confident enough to give an answer, and then I'm wrong, and I'm wrong, and I'm wrong, and like 30 freaking I'm wrongs in a row. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'm missing something here. And so around that time when Kathy asked me to go and look at this fellowship there, I'm like, well, tell me about it. So we looked at it. It's a 2-year fellowship. Most of it online, but you go there for a bunch of weeks.
And this was in integrative medicine, right? This is an integrative medicine fellowship.
Yeah. So this was Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine under Andy Weil. Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And so convinced the partners to pay for the two of us to go because we're going to bring another whole set of thinking to the clinic and make the clinic better. And so I went out there, and then everything went crazy, right? So all of a sudden, everything I thought I understood now was upside down. It was almost like I had a psilocybin journey without taking psilocybin. It was like I had these connections in my brain that made sense. And now Andy Weil is like, well, all those connections are wrong. And here are your new connections. And you can't look back at the old connections anymore and like them because they're broken. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this knowledge? And, here I am learning from Tironi Lodog, who's absolutely one of the best physicians training on herbal. I have Andy Weil flooding my brain with everything related to mind-body medicine. And I am like, I'll give you an example that I think is really sort of funny. So I was sitting in a meditation class that Andy led when we were in the in-person class, and it was 3 hours of meditation. Now, granted, the closest I had gotten to meditation was sitting in church and zoning out. So when I'm sitting there and Andy's like, just don't worry. If you fall asleep, it's good. I slept. I was like, I tried to meditate. I slept. As soon as I got out of there, I went straight to the gym and I worked out. I'm like, I can't do this stuff. And so that was the implosion theory of me finally understanding that there's a lot to this stuff. And it was actually super fascinating. So fast forward, we graduate in 2007. And now I have all this information in my head. What do I do with it? I'm in a traditional practice. At that time, there were 10 of us in the practice, and we're a private practice. So we weren't run by any overlord. We weren't told what we were supposed to do. And we didn't have any sense of we have to see this many patients a day in order to meet some metric with some MBA upstairs is telling me what to do. So my partners are gracious enough to say, hey, if it's going to make the kids' lives better, you can take a consult in the morning, a consult in the afternoon for an hour each and start seeing what this does. And so I started to. So I would go, all right, give me that Crohn's kid. Give me this patient. Give me this patient. I'll start taking them on and looking at them. And at that time, North Carolina Medicaid was pretty awesome because they would let us get Genova diagnostics testing. And so in the beginning, I was able to get microbiome testing, IgG food testing, Nutri-Evals. And so I had a window into what was going on very early that allowed me to see patterns of the 5 pillars played out in data. And so that was really interesting because then I'm starting to see, okay, this asthmatic kid has these things going wrong. This child who has type 1 diabetes has these things going wrong. And you could start to see signals that made sense for each disparate group. And so for the better part of the next 5 years, we were able to use that testing before North Carolina Medicaid decided no longer to pay for it. And I was able to effectively treat these kids with the 5 pillars. Now, supplements were not easy to get and frankly weren't used often, because my folks couldn't afford it. So the most we could get people to do is vitamin D, fish oil, and iron, because some of those were covered by Medicaid. Some of them folks would pay for the money, but anything more arbitrary than that was sort of a non-possibility. And fascinatingly enough, the signals changed enough that I was like, wow, we're putting diseases away, right? And so what that taught me is that we are, one, taking care of a population that's less what I would call fibrosed at the cellular level than an adult might be. They haven't been on this train long enough to have cellular dysregulation so broken that we can't unwind it with the 5 pillars. And so that was super fascinating to me. And then as time's gone on, now it's really just I leverage the amount of Medicaid LabCorp testing I can do to get windows into what's going on. So a lot more in the, like Erik and I are talking about in our boot camp, a lot more into the world of metabolics that are testing that I'm allowed to do, fasting insulins, uric acids, GGT, things that we're allowed to get, HSCRP, TGF beta, IL-6, IL-17. So I can look into this stuff that Medicaid will pay for that an immunologist might do, a rheumatologist might do, that's covered. And now my window shifted from, I can't do those tests, but I can do these tests. And how do we leverage those to give me a window into what's happening with the kids? And so the beauty of it is our practice has continued this now, 2025. What is that? 17 years. And from a business model, since this is a business podcast, it's not the smartest thing in the world, because that one patient that I see for an hour, I could theoretically see 4 to 6 patients with simple sick visits or well checks. And from a monetary perspective, any MBA will tell you this is idiotic. But from a patient care perspective, it's fantastic. And so I've leveraged our group, and my group has agreed that this is worth giving back to the family. Almost like I look at this as like charity care. We're willing to lose money to make sure we're getting the best outcome for these kids. And so that's sort of the lay of the land right now. And I can get deeper. We're doing a lot more stuff than that, but that's sort of the lay of the land. So I can stop talking, because otherwise I'll talk all day. Erik knows this, so you'll have to interject me randomly.
No, I this is fascinating to me because, the last job that I had was part of a health system, Dignity Health, that, was mission based. And so I had a lot of Medi-Cal and California Medicaid, type patients. And even now, in my current model, which is kind of more of a direct primary care concierge light model, there's still a fair number of people who are sort of, budget sensitive, right? And I've noticed that they're still kind of asking, well, what's that cheaper panel, right? And so I think this is a really interesting sort of side note to your really rich, interesting story, is that you've kind of, it's almost like you had 2 phases to this journey, right? The one where you kind of a little bit more freedom to just learn the new way of medicine. And then the second was sort of adapting it to a lower socioeconomic patient population, which I think is really cool, actually. An affordable way to do these, to accomplish essentially this.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I do want you to just cover, just in case our listeners, I'm guessing most of them are going to be aware of the 5 pillars, but just if you want to just review the 5 pillars, just so everybody's on the same page of what that is. And then we'll get back to Davin's question here.
So I'm going to rank order it in the new way I rank order it. So I used to rank order it with nutrition first, and that might be a bias that my wife is a nutritionist. And I had a senior partner we still have a senior partner. She's 86. He's brilliant, smartest man in our clinic, still works 3 days a week, who kept pinging me saying it's not nutrition, it's stress. And it's predominantly mental stress is the first pillar. And if you don't deal with the first pillar, you're going to have a hard time dealing with pillars 2 through 5. And I balked at it. Come on. Food's the biggest thing. There's a recent paper actually in British Medical Journal that looked at, I think it was 200,000 people. And the biggest outcome to longevity is actually SDN, specifically related to poverty. And so it reinforced his belief that that is true. So rank order, number 1 is mental stress, or what I would call a mind-body connection that is in keeping with the yin and yang of peace. The second big play by far then to me is nutrition. And are you feeding your cells, your mitochondria, and your microbiome the appropriate inputs to help them functionally give you an immunometabolism that is right, or solvent with your DNA is what I'll basically say. Third to me is movement. And so I say, in the sense of what does movement mean? Anything that gets you up off the couch and moving against gravity. And that could be swimming, running, biking, walking, jumping in space. I don't care. That's movement. Fourth is sleep. And so adequate sleep. And this is getting even so much more that I'm actually starting to think sleep should actually be combined with sun. So I'm now starting to call the fourth sleep and sun, because circadian biology dictates sleep, and sun now actually with near infrared light has huge effects on mitochondria through melatonin. So I'm now linking those two together. So sleep and sun. And then 5 is toxin exposure, or hopefully the lack thereof. And so those are the 5 pillars.
Excellent. So it's interesting. So I use a different 5th from a 5 pillar standpoint, and that is relationships and community, right? So these are, which I think our community extends to our environmental exposure. So I think it kind of folds in, and the relationship aspect kind of falls into the stress component, right? Because if our home life, if we're feeling very isolated, there's overlap in all of these pillars. But yeah, I that's great, and I think that's an important thing to kind of keep in remembrance from a business model standpoint, because there's a lot that can be done with just the 5 pillars of health in terms of moving the needle. And I'm curious to hear some more stories from what you've seen in applying this. But let's get back to what Davin was saying, and I'm curious to hear if you would do things differently. Like would you if you going back now and looking at where you are now, would you go back and still join the practice again, or would you have left after the fellowship, said, I'm going to go on my own and I'm going to set up my own private practice so I can just do this and not have the confines of a allopathic kind of insurance based model where I'm kind of being held back on some of the things that I want to be doing?
The answer is no, I would not do it again any other way. And I think this was meant to be for me because how it's played out. If I had changed course anywhere along the way, I don't think I'd be in the position I am today, which is actually a really beautiful position. And let me back that up as to the why. So when I came out of Arizona, I had thoughts about really trying to just go hang a shingle and try and do it fee for service. And so we sort of had a hybrid model. We started in a town about 30 minutes away from my current clinic where we had 3 integrative docs. One 2 pediatricians and 1 adult family medicine doc. And we did an area that was very well to do, and we thought that would be perfect for it. And it was still a concierge style. So we still used insurance, but we tried to do it in a way that was more frequent visits, so they're paid for, but less time in big chunks, so that we could get the process done with insurance so patients could get the care without having to pay cash. And what happened over that 4-year period was people never played by the rules. They would always expect more time from you, even though they're not paying for that time. And they would hold you accountable if you didn't, and actually make you feel guilty. And so after a very short period of time, I didn't like that clinic. And it was closer to my house. It was about 7 minutes from my house, and my current clinic is 45 minutes from my house. I would get home earlier from my long distance clinic than I would from my local clinic, because the amount of abuse I took from patients to want my time and monopolize my time. And my problem is some of that's my own fault, because I'm willing to give it to people. And so I tried really hard to constrain that, and people made me feel guilty, so I would invariably do that. And so we closed that clinic because that model just didn't make sense to us after a while. And so what we realized is that the process of figuring all this stuff out really had to be within the framework of a patient population who gets it, wants it, and believes in the structure of the model we've built. And that didn't bode well in that model. So we closed that model and went back to the big house where we have a huge group of providers. We're at 18 now that are centrically located for all pediatrics. And that spreads out all of so if a patient comes in and they just need something simple and I'm backed up, they can hop over to another provider and get seen, where that other clinic that was really difficult to do. And so it really took away some of that stress. Now, fast forward that over the years, as we've been modifying this model in the Medicaid system, the insurance system is starting to catch up with the knowledge that SDN matters big time. And North Carolina is one of the leading states that really cares a lot about trying to fix this, especially in the Medicaid world. So about 5 years ago, in their infinite wisdom, the State Assembly of North Carolina gave a bunch of money for private practices and hospital systems to build care management models. And so we started our own clinically integrated network, which is called Children First of North Carolina, and it is now 55,000 kids strong. And what we're able to do now is take a care management member per month fee and translate that money directly into SDN help. So, for example, we have now embedded RN care managers, we have embedded care coordinators, we have embedded social workers, we have embedded therapists now. We have all of these things that deal with pillar number 1 that I could never have had access to in a private model, right? In the same vein, unless it's supported by a huge amount of money. So, i.e., people are paying $800 an hour to come in. But now I have that set up in a traditional model that's paid for by the state government that allows these kids to get absolutely fantastic care that they never could have gotten to this level before. They got great medical care, but they didn't have that wraparound care. And now they're getting the wraparound care that I could never have seen if I didn't stay in the traditional system and keep fighting it. And I think one of the gifts I've been given by God, I think, is persistence. I am a persistent person, and I'll keep fighting for a cause that matters to me. And the cause that matters to me the most is a kid's health. And so I'll keep fighting for this stuff. And thankfully, there's people fighting and giving. And so this system we're building is just continually growing. And I think what's going to end up happening is I think it's going to be a shining model for the country to start thinking about in the traditional model, where you can do functional integrative medicine and also meet the 5 pillars, sprinkling it on every kid, every visit. And that's, I think, the other piece that I haven't even brought into the topic yet. But the business model we have started is all of our providers now understand basic 5 pillars. Everybody in our clinic is fully tuned to doing nutritional counseling. Everybody is fully tuned to doing deep dives into what's going on with the social behavioral health to get into that. We are very keen on calling in our care managers or social workers to come help this family out. So pillars 1 and 2 are getting hit every single visit, every single day, all the time.
Was that something that you instigated, or was that something that just is, I'm guessing you guys would have meetings as staff or as partners and discussed how you wanted to continue to move the practice forward. So these were things that you and other providers were seeing benefit and wanted to get it across the board. Is that how that worked, or how did you influence that?
Yeah. And I think the simplest thing would be I came home guns blazing. I was ready to go. 2008. And so I'm printing handouts and articles, and I'm just giving my partners everything I can give them on the 5 pillars and how they can start changing their practice model without learning the detailed understanding of the hard functional medicine side of this. Because it's a lot of work to do what we do. And so some of my partners love it. Some of them don't. Doesn't matter. You don't have to. But we really want everybody to understand the basics of the 5 pillars and sprinkle them on every kid, every visit. And everybody buys into that and really cares about that. And so, for example, I'll do something super simple, like, again, milk protein intolerance. In the average clinic, if you ask a provider if milk protein intolerance exists past, 6 months of age, most pediatric providers will say no. Milk protein intolerance is sort of gone by then, even though they're still having ear infections, eczema, atopic asthma, allergic rhinitis. What is truly not allergic rhinitis, it's milk protein induced intolerance. And at our clinic, every single person knows that that's milk protein intolerance. You take them off dairy again, things settle out. And so that's sort of the ethos of it's a top down, but it's also a bottom up. The providers send signals down about what's happening, but we want all of our staff to bring it up. If you see a case that's interesting, everybody's involved in the finding the issues that are out of kilter and sending it to the provider, sending it to the care management team, sending it to whoever, so you can alter what you and I talked about all the time, the upstream reasons why things went sideways. And so we're trying to get on the glide path a lot faster before the train has left the station. So far, disease is hard to fix. So, for example, this care management clinical integrated network we have now, we are aligned with 5 major Medicaid corporations. Right in North Carolina, there's 5. There's Blue Cross, otherwise known as Healthy Blue. There's United Healthcare. There's WellCare, Centene. There's AmeriHealth, Caritas, and something called CCH, Carolina Complete Health. And each one of these groups sort of follows a state model that's been laid out for care management, but each one has their own pet projects they want to fund. And so one of the things I wanted to do recently, and this is going live now actually, is I want to put CGMs on kids with obesity and asthma, but they're non-diabetic. Well, if you ask the CMO, they'll say, no, we can't do that. They're non-diabetic. I said, well, that's stupid. Like, the CGMs can help me get the kid not to become diabetic. So let's do that. We know he's metabolically abnormal. And so one of the CMOs said, this makes complete sense. I've got a slush fund bucket. Let's do it. And so we're doing an asthma clinic starting this month where I've already got all the labs. I know what every kid's metabolic framework looks like. Medicaid covered. These are all Medicaid kids, underserved. And now I'm going to go buy 50 CGMs for a 30-day supply for all of these kids. We're actually going to be 50-50. Half get it, half don't. And now I'm going to start seeing, does the CGM alter the outcome in a better way than a traditional system would? That's something I could never have done in the other model, but I can now do it in this model because I stayed attached to a semi-broken system.
I didn't expect the conversation to go in this direction, although I should have anticipated it. So in my sort of former job back when I was a CMIO, I was tagged with, helping identify a value-based care technology system, to implement. And so I became somewhat familiar with some of the different value-based care models, ACOs, et cetera. And the Medicare, Medicaid world, right, has been sort of ripe for that model for a bit, right? But it's interesting because, to your point, like, there's been money for these care management programs, but it was with the wrong philosophy, right? It was the same broken philosophy of chasing disease, right? And trying to sort of manage disease. Granted, they saw a little bit of the light. Maybe this would be pillar 1 of the social determinants of care, right? Where you're decreasing stress, maybe by identifying the socioeconomic stressors, right? That if you could sort of work on that, then maybe pillar 1 gets better, right? But it doesn't address all the other issues. And I think that's why, right now I'm sort of thinking that could be why those things haven't been successful. And now you're kind of proposing a model that, with the right doctrine, if you will, I don't know if that's a doctrine sometimes has a negative connotation, but I think in this case, you guys intentionally sort of indoctrinated your organization from the ground up with what I would call almost like a customer service type, approach, right? Where, everybody's going to get the same great customer service, which in this case is just learning about those pillars are being taught everywhere by everybody.
Yeah. And the sky's sort of the limit. It's like one of the other things I love. I don't know if you ever read the book Extreme Ownership, by Jocko Willink. So Jocko's pretty famous now. He's been out everywhere. He's even got food and drinks in the grocery store now, but Jocko was a Navy SEAL and commander in the armed forces back in the Iraq War. And he wrote a business book, actually, but it was the principles of the war, how you break those principles down, how you apply those to business. And one of the things that I found super fascinating was the book is about extreme ownership and how if you're going to lead, you have to take extreme ownership for anything that happens in your organization, which means you're at fault no matter what at the end of the day. If the person below you isn't doing what you asked, that's your fault for not making sure they know what they need to do. It needs to be redundant. The person below you needs to know their extreme ownership position is they need to be sending issues up to you only as it's important. And therefore, when they ask, there's a good reason. And therefore, you want to comply with that. And so our ethos here is that. So the extreme ownership model, when that book came out, I gave everyone a copy. Read this. We're going to talk about this, how we're going to be. And I think that's the primer behind why our group really gets this philosophy of the kid matters only, right? So I have a saying that all of our staff knows: if the kid doesn't benefit, don't do it. We're not talking about it. It's not in the game. It's not in the cards. Let's leave it at the table. And so when somebody brings something to me and the child is not at the center of that conversation, I don't even want to talk about it. It's a waste of my time to fill some information over there that doesn't benefit the child. And so we fight back on that tooth and nail. So when I have somebody telling me they don't want to do X, I say, well, let's talk about why. You need to want to do that because it benefits the kid. So I think ethos-wise, businesses need to have that model in place to have everyone on the same page, the caring part, to have the 5 pillars. You have to have an ethos that says everybody should want to do the 5 pillars. And so I think if I'm going to give any reasoning to the why we're able to do it constructively, it's because the ethos permeates the ecosphere here.
Yeah. So there's an element of a culture, right, that you guys have established that everybody's bought into that allows you guys to be able to be on the same page. And collectively, then you accomplish a lot more than if you were the only one continuing to see your 1-hour consults a couple of times a day and you're taking on all the heavy, difficult cases and trying to fix the problems. Everyone's just dumping all of their difficult cases on you, right? I mean, granted, you're still doing that, but now there's a lot of other, everybody's doing a sense of the lifting, even though you may still be doing a little heavier lifting, but because everybody's lifting upwards, it's benefiting the whole population. Reminds me of the book Culture Code. It's one that Davin and I have read. We'll be talking a little bit more about later on. The other one that comes to mind is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And then they talk about that very thing where you have either above the line leadership or below the line, right? And the below the line is the one who's out trying to blame everybody else for the problems, and everybody else needs to just fix their stuff so that we can move forward. And above the line leadership is, no, the buck stops with me. Let me find out how I can better support. How can I take ownership of what's happening? Let me get in and help solve the problem versus it being somebody else's problem. So I think that's awesome. In terms of the financial success of your clinic, it sounds like in order. So I know that there's going to be a certain number of our listeners, a certain number of the practitioners that we will get this out to who want to do more underserved medicine. It sounds like if you had said, well, I still want to see the same patients, but I'm going to go ahead and do my own clinic. You tried some model where you were trying to increase the frequency of the visits and keep them to that 15 to 20 minute time slot. That didn't work out. It sounds like this model seems to work for an underserved population. If you have kind of a collective where you can have 1 or 2 individuals within that collective who can kind of feed, it makes it work because they can compensate for you financially to be able to expend the extra time. Would you say that like this, you feel like this model does then work for the underserved population?
100%. And so twofold answer there that needs to be looked at. So Medicaid's about a 66% pay rate compared to commercial. So by definition, you're getting underpaid compared to your best commercial payer, like Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. So you're already taking it on the chin if you live in a Medicaid highly served area. And so you don't go into that area with the knowledge base that you're going to make a ton of money in general, because the system is slated against you just from the get-go. So having that in the knowledge base makes it a little bit easier. Now, the other part of that argument is if you have enough providers that are doing the work of the whole collective. So again, 18 of us seeing a lot of kids, right? Everybody knows that the few patients that I see that we're losing money on saves a lot of headache from everybody else who might end up seeing that kid when something's not being taken care of adequately. And I sort of look at this as if we send in the subspecialist, and the subspecialist, because the functional medicine stuff doesn't tend to lend itself as well to subspecialty care, they'll end up back on our books anyway because they haven't dealt with the problem, right? And so everybody sees it as a win-win. The amount of time I'm spending, losing a little bit of money, it comes back full circle because it's less headache for everybody. So everybody spreads the love around financially. And so it does work out very well. Now, it only works in the sense because it's egalitarian. The partners, we just share the money across the board. I don't make more money based on productivity than one of my other partners does. So that's also part of the problem, because if the system was set up such that I would only get like what they call eat what you kill, then it'd be really hard to do that, because then you'd lose a fair amount of money that, puts food on the table at your house. And as pediatricians, we're not sitting there like orthopedics with tons of money to throw around, with reimbursement style. So part of that's also the fundamentals of the practice makeup and the structure. And our practice, again, is an egalitarian group. I mean, we're 7 of us around a boardroom making decisions in like a Supreme Court, where if it's 4-3, it's 4-3, end of story. Nobody complains, nobody whines, and we move on. And I've been here 25 years. We've had not one fight. And I can say that with the most complete honesty. Like, we've never had a fight. We've got disagreements on which path it goes, but once 4-7 happens, 4-3 happens, it's over. We move on. And I think that, to me, is why we've been so successful, because the end of the day, the ethos is the kid. And so we work always towards the kid. And so that means we suck it up and move on if we don't like
and
something.
That may be unique to pediatrics in some aspects. Yeah. I think that at least the pediatricians that I know tend to have that more of that mindset than it seems like other practices. I know we had a pediatrician in our practice for a little while. She was absolutely amazing. Our model's different. With our model, a lot of the ancillary services and the supplement sales are what kind of buoy us up so that we can see a few less patients per day, but it's still, because it's insurance-based, it's volume-based, right? We have to see a certain number of patients per day in order to make our books stay in the black and not in the red. And it was a challenge for us to keep a pediatrician on staff, because she, from a financial standpoint, we were more of a, there was some sharing, but there was an element that you eat what you kill, and she was not able to bring in the same kind of revenue because the children weren't getting IV therapy, they weren't purchasing as much supplements, they weren't using the chiropractor, so the ancillary services that were buoying up the clinic were not being really utilized by the pediatric population. So we kept her as long as she was willing to stay, but it became clear that her ambitions in terms of making more money than we could provide her, or what finally drove her to open up her own private practice, which now is a completely cash-based concierge practice. And because we don't have really a lot of integrative pediatricians in our neck of the woods, she's able to make it work, right? She's able to peel off enough of those who are willing to pay for her services that she's able to do well. And And in her model, she's had to keep it completely lean. It's just herself, an MA in literally like a 1,200 square foot, office space, and that's it. So I applaud you for sticking with it and being able to convince your partners the benefits of this. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, time will show how it grows from here. And I think for me, if the state governments and the federal government thinks this process through, they will look more at funding primary care to prevent disease instead of spending all this money on treating disease. The vast majority of money spent in healthcare is wasted in the later part of the disease process, which is much more expensive. And the amount of money we could save if we poured money into continuous glucose monitors, into wearables, into supplements, into, healthy nutrition for kids. I mean, bloody hell, if we just fed them good food at school, what we could do. I mean, there's so many things that if I had my way, if I ran for president, it'd be pretty simple. High quality school, accountable. Teachers would be held accountable for poor activity. High quality nutrition, no matter what. Everything the kids would be fed would be real. They'd have chefs in there. They'd feed them real food. And it wouldn't be they won't eat vegetables. Sorry, there's no other options. You're not getting, garbage food. Yeah, we're not doing that, right? Like, if your parents want to do that at home, that's okay. But in school, we're going to feed you nourishing food to help you be there. 3, every school would be clean, right? We'd have good air handlers. We'd get the air cleaned out every single day. We'd have non-toxic chemicals. We would make sure that these areas aren't filled with mold and garbage, right? And clean water. The fact that Detroit had lead in the water in a country like ours with this much money, how is that even possible? And until we addressed everything that the kids need, the next generation that's going to grow up to be the doctors, the lawyers, the business people, until we address that, I don't want to hear another thing about spending money on some pet project. No, we're fixing this first. Then we'll talk about other projects to keep the government funded. That would be me running for office, and I'd probably get assassinated on day one.
No, I love this idea though, which again will never fly in our country because our political model is all about, what you can give adults today, right? But if you think about the whole insurance model, especially the government insurance model, right? If they'd have to essentially recognize that all the money that they poured into those kids, right, would save them so much money in a few decades, right? Like in 3 or 4 decades, it would totally turn the whole system around, right? But no one looks at, our politicians don't look 20, 30 years out, right? They look at an election cycle and that's it, unfortunately.
Well, and corporate capture is real. I mean, when the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Medical Association are 2 big overlords watching over our patients and us are promoting, Ozempic and Wegovy in lieu of changing kids' school food. We've got a huge problem. And I'm not saying the drugs don't work. It's clear that in microdosing, they're probably going to work really darn well. I think they're dosing them wrong right now, but they'll probably work really well. But at that cost, you got to be kidding me. I mean, $15,000 a year per kid, I could feed them some really darn good food and probably not need the Wegovy and that stuff. But, the AAP doesn't seem to have any interest in chasing down, for me, what I consider to be preventative medicine. Instead, it's, again, expensive drug treatment medicine.
Natural production of GLP-1 would be a much better investment for sure.
Amen.
Right.
I mean, let's go, folks. But yeah, I mean, we can go all day long on corporate capture.
I want to make a comment, and then I want to bring up an important point that you made, and then we have kind of a final question for you. But it's interesting to think about not only feeding them the right food for the purposes of improving their bodily function and health, but from an education standpoint, right? You now then are providing them exposure to foods that they're not going to get at home, right? In a lot of these cases, the parents aren't cooking well because they don't know any better. And so by providing good, healthy nutrition choices at school that they enjoy eating, all of a sudden now creates an educational component to the health that I think sometimes is lost in the conversation, right?
Let me tell you a story, because this is what's really cool about this clinically integrated network that we have. So part of that forced us to start a foundation. So we now have a foundation called Salisbury Pediatric Foundation in order to receive high quality food from places that want to donate it, like a Food Lion or a Harris Teeter or a local grocer. And lo and behold, one of the MCOs said, oh, by the way, you want some fridges and freezers? Sure, that'd be great. So we have now 3 commercial grade, humongous fridges and freezers in our office. So we are now giving out fresh fruits and vegetables with recipes and lean proteins and everything to impoverished patients every single day. The coolest thing about this is now providers, like one of my partners, Jen Hudson, came and said, oh, yeah, by the way, I was in the grocery store the other day and one of my patients came up to me and she said, look at my cart. And she showed all the food. It was all fresh fruits and vegetables. I'm making a green smoothie for my kid today. And it's all because you pushed me to go this way and you're helping me and you're giving me access to good foods. And so again, kudos to the North Carolina state government for providing the access for us to now take the reins and run with this. And to me, that's the thing, is you have to have somebody who's willing to fund a project that says, I want these kids to live better lives. And then it's just to us, the group, that has the ability to now say, I'm touching these kids every damn day. Let's put our finger on the pulse of happiness and all this. So I'm super thrilled to see where this goes. We did a Fill the Fridge campaign for Easter. We got thousands of dollars of donations. And we're just literally taking that to the grocery store and to the farmers markets and buying food, filling our fridges. Patients roll in, they take it. And we had Food Line drop off a pallet of strawberries one day. We just send out through Facebook, fresh strawberries, come get them. And all of our patients who can't afford stuff come by and pick up the strawberries. And so to me, it's just you have to dream. You have to want to build something better than yourself. And you have to have somebody who cares enough to back it. And thankfully, North Carolina's doing it.
But I think that's great is as a collective that you guys are looking for those opportunities too, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges, to your point, Davin, what you were talking about, is that there's so much downstream attention that as practitioners, we're almost head down. Like we're so focused on trying to put out the fire that we're not looking up to see what's starting the fire, what else is going on around us. And I think it's leading to, we've talked about this earlier on our show about the burnout, right? I mean, the problem with family medicine and pediatrics, internal medicine, most primary care aspects is that we're tired. We're tired of dealing with these chronic disease issues, and the tools that we have are inadequate. So there's no satisfaction in what we're doing, but we're so busy. We just have head down and we're just doing it day after day after day. Right. All of this the goal here is to back things up. And I love what your pediatric group has done to be able to incorporate, whose ever great ideas are running through Congress, but you guys are tapping into that and utilizing it for the right reasons. And I think that's really, really impressive. Davin, any other thoughts or questions you want to ask about that?
Well, I just want to comment actually that, I think all of us that have read books on leadership, there's a difference between, people who are sort of out, like trying to light all the candles, right, for everybody versus just bringing enough light where you don't need candles anymore, right? And I think that's the inspiration model. And you've inspired me. I mean, I'm like just hearing your story and having been in a system where, I just saw over and over again, one program after another that just didn't work in the Medicaid population, right? Especially in kids. The thought of some of the things you're doing, if we could implement that here, right? Recreate little versions of what you're doing across the country, that would be so exciting and so transformational for families and for kids whose lives would be changed forever. So I'm inspired by you. That's awesome. I love it.
I appreciate it. I tell you this though, man, people want this. Like I talk to people all the time. We just interviewed a young lady the other day to come join our care management team, and she works at the health department. And I asked her, so what's the issue? She goes, I'm constrained. There are so many rules about what I can and can't do and how I can build or do this. I want to do a newsletter. And I'm like, what do you want to talk about? I want to give feedback to the school systems about things that are going on. I listen, I won't touch it. Well, there has to be approved, all this. So to me, I was like, well, if you come here, you just right away and I'll look at it. If I see nothing conflicting with what is okay in the world, we're going to turn it loose and work with the school system. And so you start to see these people who all of a sudden they've been wanting to open up like a flower, and they just need an environment to be in. And so I'm like, I'm going to give you a whiteboard. You start drawing, and then we'll see what the drawing looks like. And the only thing we ask is that the kid's at the center of that drawing. And if you keep the kid at the center, nobody's going to do anything nefarious. Like, it's the beauty. Our team down there, like, they're coming to us constantly with ideas. And it's like, whoa, we can't do all these at once. Like, we're doing a back to school drive, and it's like in 3 weeks, and they have 40 different groups showing up as vendors. And they're giving away like 400 backpacks filled with everything these kids need for school, all donated. And I did nothing. I just heard about it. I'm like, this is great. And they're just turned loose. And it's this, to your point, it's this, the microsphere is here, the macrosphere is here, and each person inside that is building something that they believe in. And so it's about their passions. And I'm just enjoying the ride now.
Well, I think one other point that I was thinking about throughout this is there's no sort of moral complexity to helping kids. You know what I mean? I think like when you look at like adults, and I don't think we should do this, but I think we do, right? As a society, judge adults for their lack of health, right? And I think you could probably go back to their childhood or whatever, and it's just programming. But with kids, all that goes away. All the moral ambiguity goes away, because who doesn't want to see a child succeed? Who doesn't want to help a child? And so this idea of put the child's health first, I love it. It's beautiful.
Well, at the end of the day, that's what we should always be doing for every human, right? I mean, that's
for every human, but
that's
for
the
kids,
essence of functional medicine.
Yeah,
you're right. It is
easier to get on board with kids, right? With adults, there's that, judgment factor, unfortunately, sometimes, right? But you're right. It shouldn't be that way, but
again, I think that's something that we can change as a society. And I used to look at moms who were narcotically abusing and pregnant and delivering. I used to really despise these women. And then somebody looked at me one day, and it was a very great statement. And they were like, I wonder how hard it has to be in your life that you're willing to take drugs at that level and then have a baby. The amount of death, disparity, pain. And I was like, wow, that's really the way we should be looking at this. And so every single mom I see now, I have so much compassion for her. Like, what happened to you? How much abuse did you suffer? What happened in your life that it's so bad? And I try and sit with that. And I think if we as a society go more in that direction, yeah, man, I'm with you. We'll change the world one person at a time.
Well, we're coming up on the end of our time, but I want to throw two questions out to you. The first question is, tell us a little bit about some of the other things that you now are involved with that are generating some revenue, right? Because your sole focus isn't just seeing patients in the pediatric clinic. You're utilizing your integrative and functional medicine knowledge to help you do some other things. So I'd like you to tell us about that. And then why don't you close with, what do you kind of see as the future of the business of functional medicine? And if you could continue to change how medicine is being practiced from a business standpoint, what do you think would be the key component to continue to move things forward in that world?
So let me take it backwards first. So I think moving forward, functional medicine and especially integrated functional medicine pediatricians need to be more comfortable with charging appropriate fees for their services. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that my colleagues make who are not in my position, where they can survive in a fee-for-service insurance-based market, need to be quite comfortable with the fact that you have an incredible skill set. You're at top of your game, and you should feel comfortable charging the appropriate amount of money in order to get reimbursed at a level that is comfortable, right? That to me, I think, is the biggest struggle I see with people, because by nature, we're very good-hearted in medicine. We want to heal others. And so when somebody comes to us and says they can't afford that, don't want to pay it, we feel bad and we reduce our prices. There's nowhere else in the world that happens. Your lawyer won't do that in general. Walmart's not going to let you buy the widget for anything. And so I think we need to get more comfortable with that very difficult part of life, which is I am worthy of being paid X, right? And I don't think X is exorbitant, right? Whatever that is for your services. That would be the first piece. If you can build ancillary funds from other things that you do, I think that's great. If it's And again, there has to be the moral compass of, if you are selling supplements, they are necessary 1,000%. And if that are necessary 1,000% and you make a little bit of extra money on that, I think that's okay. Where I wonder with some folks that the supplement game can be a piece of ways to earn money. And I think that's morally a dangerous slippery slope that you have to be careful of. But I think if your moral compass is super strong there, I think that's okay too. Fundamentally, I think your knowledge is what you should be trying to use as a way to earn more money. If you're really good at what you do, sharing your knowledge. So, for example, Erik, and what you and I are doing lately, doing these boot camps, right? Being paid appropriately to teach others how to successfully be in functional medicine looking at labs. I think that's excellent and something that we should, again, be compensated for, because you and I spent a long time learning all this information. I'm almost coming up on my 20th year, deep diving into every article I can find. So I feel very comfortable being paid appropriately for giving away that knowledge. And I think that's something that people should do, if they feel comfortable in that. Where does it go from here? I think prevention's the key. So I think AI and wearables are going to be part of my game moving forward. I think we're going to be sitting in a world where CGMs are going to be the new thing. Once the powers that be get that's actually going to save them way more money down the road. And it literally having AI ping the patient about what you eat, or shoot me a picture of what you just ate. And the AI goes, "Oop, dude, this is why that spiked," or tell me what's been going on. And that real time feedback is going to change the lives of these kids and will be a part of that experience. I think that is the future. I'm already using AI tremendously in diagnostic skills, awareness. Like, if I see a patient that I'm not sure of, even today I had a kid with inability to sleep. I've done a bunch of work with him in autism. So I pulled up AI and said, what am I missing? And the only thing that I was missing that I couldn't find after a deep dive was something I'm not willing to do, that I'm going to send psychiatry or neurology for. But I think that leveraging AI is going to be huge in the future. And again, there is skepticism around it because it does make mistakes. But in general, I'm not going to prescribe or do anything without vetting it further. I just want the window into maybe something I'm not thinking of, sort of like an up-to-date. So I think leveraging AI is going to be huge, and how that plays out in monetary, I think it's going to make us more efficient. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to see more patients, which means we're not going to potentially have to charge as much. So maybe the democratization of our skill sets will allow us to make more money there. That's my hope and dream. Who knows? Maybe not. So I'm sort of looking at it with very eyes wide open and very thrilled AI is here. I don't see AI as a bad thing. I see AI as totally going to be like, in some ways, it's like juicing in baseball. I'll be able to hit that ball out of the park now. And if you don't establish a relationship with AI, well, you're going to be the guy sitting on the dugout bench going, wow, that ball went out of the park. How come I can't do that? And so I think everybody in functional medicine should start learning how to use AI in an appropriate way. So to me, I think those would be the biggest pieces of where the financial side of this is going to grow. Again, my moral compass is very clear. I think the most important thing to do is keep the kid at the center. If I can enjoy a good living with the child at the center, I'm great with it. If not, then I really would be fine with less money.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on and look at it, business of medicine from a root cause analysis in a different perspective. And we really appreciate that perspective that you have brought with us today. Davin, you want to give us any final thoughts or words?
Chris, if you ever get approached about, some value-based care initiatives or projects, like I would love to just learn about it or be involved in some way. I think that's the future of like Medicaid, right? And even Medicare in general, these, ACOs and value-based care models. I think if we just injected the functional medicine philosophy into those, they could actually work, because it's all about outcomes, right? And I think there's no better way to get outcomes than, getting to the root cause and prevention through those lifestyle pillars.
We're doing that now already. The problem is assignment and attribution. The systems are not very good at assigning and attributing patients appropriately. And so by definition, value-based care is dead in the water until they fix that.
No, that's been the challenge all along. I mean, I looked at so many technologies that we're hoping to solve that, and it's such a difficult such a difficult problem for
Well,
sure.
the solve is actually, I don't think the solve is that hard. For me personally, I think where they could do this now, even if they just want to do it off claims, which isn't even real time, right? They could just say, hey, if you've seen this provider out of the 6 months of the year plus 1 day, you're attributed to that provider. If you saw this other provider 6 months and 1 day out of that year, you go to that provider. Because what they're doing now is if they attribute it to me and they've never seen me, but they know they saw the clinic down the road, I'm getting dinged for it. And so when we looked at our actual, like recently we did a deep dive on some of our highest paying kids, and like the first 15, 5 of them weren't our patients. One of them was 37. Like you want me to get into value-based care when that's my panel? No, come on.
Well, Erik, maybe I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but maybe for the next podcast, we'll bring Chris back. And I think this would be an interesting topic that is a challenge to our country. And sounds like Chris has some
yeah, we've talked about on the podcast doing, we have interviews, and then we would do just topics where we just talk about topics within the business of medicine where we're not so much talking about the journey, but we're actually talking about a critical piece that is from the root cause of the problem of the business of medicine, right? And that's, I think, one of the things that we are trying to just bring some awareness and exposure to. We don't pretend to have the answers, but we may be able to find some answers as we have these discussions and we talk to a bunch of really smart and ingenious people and entrepreneurs who are doing some great things. And we start collecting these little nuggets. We may find over time that we have some good solutions. So really appreciate the time that you took to be with us today. We're excited. We're just getting this podcast launched, and we're also grateful that we're going to be able to have this piggyback on your channel and utilize that and for as long as we can. And we appreciate it. So thank you. And we're excited for our next guest. It's a bit of a mystery to who that's going to be yet, but we'll let you know as soon as we find out.
Fun times, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
All right, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Davin.
Thank you, Chris.